3 days. The rain has not stopped. On a muddy road winding into the valley, a young woman spurs her mare through the silver mist, unaware that someone has been waiting for her. For 25 years, ahead, rising out of the clouds, Castle Ravenmoor, the iron gate, 12 feet of black steel, swings open, no hand. Sound, as if the very stones have recognized her. The mare, who has crossed 3 storms without flinching, takes one step back. In the courtyard, a dry fountain. A tall figure stands beside it, motionless, face hidden in shadow, eyes fixed on a window high above, a window she has never set foot near, closest on her wrist. A pale crescent scar, white against the skin, like a small moon. Who put it there? She does not remember. Far across the courtyard, behind an iron door with no handle, no window, only a heavy bar, something begins to move. A great weight, one step, then another, toward the door. The woman tightens her grip on the reins. Slowly, she raises her hand, reaches toward the cold iron. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Isolde Briarcliff sat on her mare, Saint, and watched the iron gates of Castle Ravenmoor rise out of the mist. Black bars, 12 feet high, a crest at the top. She could not read in the gray light. The gates opened, without sound. She had expected sound. She had expected a lot of things. A welcome, lamps in the windows, a steward at the door with her name on his lips. Some indication that the master of this place knew she was coming, had been told to expect her, had perhaps even cared to prepare. There was none of that. There was only the gate, opening, by itself, as if a hand had reached out from inside the stone. Saint did not like it. Saint had carried her 200 miles, through 3 storms, across a river that had nearly drowned them both, and Saint had never once flinched. Saint flinched now. Easy, Isolde said, low, the way her mother had taught her. Easy, girl. The mare took one step forward, onto the wet flagstones of the courtyard. The gates closed behind them, without sound, so Isolde rode in. The courtyard was vast and empty, a fountain in the center. Long dry, water from the sky falling instead. A gargoyle on the corner of the keep with a broken wing. 3 stone steps. A black door. No one came out for a long time. She sat there, in the rain, her cloak heavy with water, her hands cold on the reins, Saint shifting beneath her, the whole place watching, or so it felt, because no place this large could be this empty without watching. A figure appeared in the doorway, a man, tall, thin, in black livery with silver at the collar. He walked down the 3 steps, crossed the courtyard, took Saint's bridle without asking. Lady Briarcliff, yes. Follow. She dismounted. Her boots hit the stone with a sound that seemed too loud. She put her hand on Saint's neck. The mare was trembling. She'll be cared for? The man looked at her, as if she had asked something strange, of course. He led Saint away, toward a far archway. He did not look back to see if she was following him. She was, because what else was there to do? She had come 200 miles for this. She had been on the road 3 weeks. She had crossed a river that had nearly drowned her and her horse both. She had slept in barns. She had eaten what the road gave her. She had not turned around. She would not turn around now. Not in a courtyard, not in rain. Her father owed Lord Ravenmoor 100,000 crowns. Her father had asked his eldest daughter to clear it. She had said yes. She had said yes because there was no one else to say it. Because Cassia was 22 and pretty and useful for the kind of marriage that might still save the manor. Because Isolde was 26 and unmarried, and shaped like her grandfather. Because the manor she had been raised in had 38 empty stalls in a stable that had once held 40. Because her father had cried, in her presence, for the first time in her life, the night the solicitor came, and so she had said yes. She walked, behind a man she did not know, into a stable she had never seen, to meet a horse she did not yet have a name for, in the rain. The stables were not what she expected. She had been raised in stables. Her father's stables, Briarcliff Manor, where she had learned to walk between the legs of stallions before she had learned to read, where the smell of clean hay and warm leather and good oil had been the smell of home, where 40 horses had once stood in oak stalls, where a great red door had opened onto a riding ring of white sand, and where, in better years, men had come from 3 counties to buy a Briarcliff colt. That was before. This was after. After her father's debts had taken the white sand. After they had taken the oak stalls. After they had taken 38 of the 40 horses. After they had taken everything but the manor walls and Saint, and the riding crop her mother had left her with the silver tip. But this. The stables of Castle Ravenmoor. This was something else. Stone, vaulted, the ceiling 40 feet above her head. Gas lamps burning blue. She had not seen gas lamps in a stable before. The stalls, oak, polished, brass fittings. Each stall the size of a small bedroom. The floor dry. Swept. She counted as she walked, 30 stalls on the left side, 30 stalls on the right, 60 horses. She did not see them all, but she could smell them, hear them. The soft breath, the shift of weight from hoof to hoof. Animals at rest, well kept, better kept than most men. Saint, beside her, lifted her head, sniffed the air, and whickered. Once, a horse far down the corridor whickered back. "Stall 42, the man said. For your mare, he led Saint into it. The stall had a feeding trough full of clean oats, fresh water in a stone basin, straw deep enough to bury a child in, a blanket folded on the rail, wool, embroidered with a small black crest. Whose stall is this normally?" The man straightened from the stall door. "It is your mare's now." He did not answer the question she had asked. She did not press, because she had been raised to press.
To question.
To dig until she had what she wanted. But she had also been raised to know when a man had told her, without telling her, that the answer to her question was not for her ears tonight, so she let it go. For now, your room is above, he pointed, a wooden staircase, climbing the stable wall, to a loft, with a door. My room is above the stables. Yes. She did not say the thing that came to her mouth. She did not say that she had been promised, in the letter from her father's solicitor, lodging in the castle, in a room with a fire and a window, and her own basin for washing. She did not say that her father had paid in the last of his pride for her to be lodged as a lady. She did not say that this, stables, the loft, was an insult so neat, so precisely calibrated, that it could only have been ordered by the master of this house himself. She did not say any of that, because saying it would have done nothing, and because underneath the insult there was something else, a practicality. A man who lodged her over his stables had decided, perhaps, that she would be there often, that she would want to be near the horses, that she might prefer the smell of straw to the smell of cold stone. A man who had thought that of her was a man who had thought about her. That was interesting. That was the first interesting thing about Castle Ravenmoor. "Thank you," she said. The man bowed, slightly. Not the bow of a servant to a lady, the bow of a senior man to a guest he had not yet decided to respect. He left. She stood in the lamplight, beside her mare, and listened to him go. The boots, the corridor, the far door, a latch. Silence. Then she put her face into Saint's neck, and breathed just for a moment, just one moment, to know she had got here, alive. The loft was small, bed, table, hearth. A single window facing the courtyard, a washstand with a chipped basin, a trunk for things already brought up, no fire. She knelt at the hearth. There was wood in the iron bin. There was a flint on the mantel. There was kindling in a basket. She lit it herself. Of course she did. She had not expected anyone else to. When the fire was going, she unpacked her trunk. 3 dresses, 2 riding habits, a nightgown, a pair of boots, second pair for stable work, her mother's saddle wrapped in oilcloth, the riding crop with the silver tip, a small wooden box, with letters inside, from her sister Cassia, from their last summer together. Before all this, she did not open the box. She set it on the table, did not open it. She unpacked, she folded, she made the bed. She washed her face in the basin. She combed her hair. She braided it. She changed out of the wet riding habit and into the dry one. She set her boots by the fire. A knock at the door. Come. A boy, 11. 12 maybe. Mop of red hair. Freckled. Holding a tray. Bread, my lady. And cheese. And a small ham. Mrs. Quint says you'll be hungry, Mrs. Quint. Housekeeper. Wren, my lady. Wren, yes. She had not eaten since dawn. The bread was warm, the ham was good. The cheese was a hard yellow she did not recognize. There was a small jug of milk. Fresh, Wren. Sit down, my lady. Sit there. By the fire he sat, on the floor, cross-legged, as if he had been told never to sit on a lady's chair and meant to obey it. Have you eaten? Yes, my lady. Are you sure? Some, my lady. She tore the bread, gave him half, cut the ham, gave him half, cut the cheese, gave him half. He looked at it like he had not seen so much food in front of him in a long time. Eat. He ate. She ate. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then she said, Have you worked here long? Wren, all my life, my lady. All your life. I was born in the laundry. In the laundry. My mother was a washing woman. She died when I was 3. They kept me. Because I was useful with the horses. From very small, she watched him eat. A boy who had been kept because he was useful. Who had not been told he was wanted. Who had stayed anyway. She thought of her own younger self. She set down her knife. Wren. Yes, my lady. How many horses does Lord Ravenmoor own? 63, my lady. 63, yes. And how many of them are good? He thought about that. A long time for a boy his age. He chewed his bread slowly. And looked at the fire. 62 of them, my lady. The way he said it. Made her set down her cup. And the 63rd, Wren? He did not look at her. He looked at the fire. The 63rd is not a horse, my lady. Not a horse. That's what the old men say. What is he then? They don't know what he is, my lady. They only know what he isn't. She waited. But he had said all he meant to say. He finished his bread. He brushed the crumbs off his knees. He stood. He bowed. He went to the door. Then he turned. My lady, yes, Wren, don't go in the east stable, the far end. Behind the iron door. Why, just don't. He left. She did not sleep well. She went to the window, looked out onto the courtyard. The rain had thinned to a mist. The mist had a strange silver quality to it, lit from the moon, perhaps, or from something else she could not tell. There was a man in the courtyard. He was standing by the dry fountain. He was not moving. He was looking up at her window. She could not see his face, only the shape of him. Tall, long coat, bare head, dark hair, hands at his sides. Perfectly still. She did not move. He did not move. How long they stood there. She could not afterwards have said. A minute. 5. 10. He turned. He walked across the courtyard, up the 3 steps, through the black door. The door closed. She let out the breath she had been holding. She had not known she had been holding it. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her hands over her face and told herself to stop trembling. She did not sleep at all until the very edge of dawn, when the rain had stopped and a single bird had begun to sing in the courtyard below. Then she slept for perhaps an hour. Then she woke, dressed, and went down to the stables. She found Saint exactly as she had left her. She found a senior stableman she had not seen the night before. He was leaning on the door of stall 42, with his arms crossed. He was perhaps 60 years old, square, gray hair, a face that had been weathered in seasons she could not imagine. He looked at her up and down. Once, Lady Briarcliff. Yes, Hollis, Mr. Hollis. Just Hollis, Hollis. He nodded at Saint. Rides well? She does. Bloodline? Briarcliff. He almost smiled. Almost. Your father's strain or your grandfather's. Grandfather's, that's a strain. It was. The corner of his mouth went down at that. The corner of a man who had known of her grandfather, who had perhaps even known her grandfather, who knew what the strain had been, and what had become of it, and of her. He pushed off the stall door. Filly, he said. Stall 18, won't take a bit. She's 3, throws her head, bites, won't be put on a lunge line. Yes, she's been with us 6 weeks. Came from a stud in the south. We can't get a saddle on her. Yes. He nodded toward stall 18. Show me so. She went to stall 18. The filly inside was the color of wet bark. Eyes white at the edges, ears flat. She came at Isolde's hand when Isolde put it through the stall door. Isolde did not pull her hand back. She let the filly's teeth come. The teeth stopped. An inch from her skin, the filly did not bite. The filly snorted. Once. Hard. And backed up. Open the door, Isolde said. Hollis hesitated. Open the door, Hollis. He opened it. Isolde walked into the stall. She did not look at the filly. Not directly. She looked at the wall, the corner, the floor. She stood, hand at her side, palm open, toward the filly, but not extended, just open. She breathed slow. The filly watched her, for 2 minutes hard. Ears forward, back, then forward, and stayed there. The filly took a step, another. The filly walked to Isolde's hand and put her nose into the open palm, and blew. Once, long, warm. Isolde turned her head slowly, looked the filly in the eye. Hello, sweetheart. The filly blinked. Isolde lifted her other hand. Slow. So slow it might not have been moving at all. She placed it on the filly's neck, just under the jaw. The filly closed her eyes. After a minute, Isolde walked out of the stall. The filly followed her to the door. Isolde turned and put a hand up. Stop. The filly stopped. Isolde closed the stall door. She turned to Hollis. He was not leaning on the post anymore. He was standing very straight. He looked at her a long time. He said, "Mrs. Quint will want you for breakfast." He said it as if he could not think of anything else to say. He turned and walked away. Mrs. Quint was 65 years old. Iron gray hair pinned tight to her skull, black dress, white collar, keys at her waist on a chain. The chain was old, the keys were older. She received Isolde in a small back parlor off the kitchen. 2 chairs, a table, a teapot, a plate of small cakes that looked as if they had been made very recently, by someone who had not entirely wanted to make them. "Sit, my lady." "Thank you, Mrs. Quint. Tea." "Yes, please." Mrs. Quint poured. Her hand was very steady, but her eyes, as Isolde took the cup, were not. They were on Isolde's wrist, where Isolde's sleeve had ridden up, where the pale crescent scar showed, on the inside of the bone, white against the skin, like a small moon, my lady. "Yes, that scar." Isolde set down her tea. "Yes. Where did you get it? I don't remember." A long pause. The fire in the small grate cracked once. The teapot ticked as it cooled. "You don't remember?" "No. You were old enough." Isolde looked at her. Old enough for what? Mrs. Quint did not answer. She picked up her own tea, drank, set it down. She looked at the fire. "Mrs. Quint, my lady, you knew my mother." The teacup stopped, halfway to her mouth. "What makes you say that, my lady?" "Because you look at me like a woman who knows my mother, not like a woman who is meeting me for the first time." Mrs. Quint set the cup down, very carefully. "Eat your cakes, my lady. They are not bad, and you have not eaten properly in some days. I can see it in your hands." Isolde looked at her hands. She had not noticed she was clasping them. She unclasped them. "Mrs. Quint." "Yes, my lady. My mother died when I was 6. Of fever." Mrs. Quint nodded. "Yes, my lady." She nodded as if of course. As if of course Isolde's mother had died of fever. As if it would be impolite to suggest anything else. As if the cakes on the plate had been baked by a woman who knew that the answer to that particular question was a lie. But Mrs. Quint did not say that. Mrs. Quint said, "His lordship will see you tonight, my lady. After the evening meal. In the library. Geoffrey will fetch you, his lordship." "Yes, and you'll bring me up there yourself, will you?" Mrs. Quint. "Geoffrey will, my lady." "You won't come." "No, my lady." "Why not?" "Because I will be in my own bed by then, my lady, saying my own prayers, and his lordship does not like a fuss made of guests." "I'm not a guest." Mrs. Quint looked at her. It was the first time her eyes had stopped moving. "You are a guest, my lady, until his lordship says otherwise." And he has not said otherwise yet. She did not see the master of the house all day. She saw the stables, the riding ring, a paddock of yearlings the color of new pennies, kept entirely separate from the rest of the herd. A small gray gelding that limped its near's hind, and the boy Wren, who was rubbing it down with a poultice that smelled of mustard. The carriage house, and the tack room, and the hay barn. A long range of stone outbuildings she could not name. A kitchen garden behind a wall. She saw the men of the household. Geoffrey, Mr. Pell the steward, who bowed and said 3 sentences in clear, careful English, and left her with the feeling that he was a man who had measured every word he had ever spoken. 2 grooms who would not meet her eye. A blacksmith named Coombs, an enormous man, who looked up from his forge when she passed and said, "Lady Briarcliff," and nothing else. And then, at the far end of the courtyard, past the carriage house, past the kitchen garden wall, past the last paddock, was the east stable. It was a building of its own. It was set apart from the other stables by perhaps 30 yards. It had no windows. It had a single door. The door was iron. The door had a bar across it. The door had no handle on the outside. Isolde stood at the wall of the kitchen garden and looked at it for a long time, until Wren came up behind her with a bucket and tugged at her sleeve. "My lady." "Yes, you're not supposed to look at it either." She turned and looked at the boy. "Who told you that?" "Wren." "Hollis, you obey Holla." "Yes, my lady. Always, always, mostly." She smiled. "Just a little. Come on then. Take me away." He took her hand. It was an unusual thing for a stable boy to take a lady's hand. He was not a child who had touched many ladies. She could feel it in his grip, the uncertainty, as if he was not quite sure if she was real. He led her back across the courtyard, toward the kitchen, toward warm bread and a cup of broth Mrs. Quint had put aside for her. She did not look back at the east stall, but she felt it. She felt it for the rest of the afternoon, as if a door with no handle was watching her, from across a courtyard, with no eyes. That evening she dressed with care. She thought, for an hour, about how to dress. In the end, she chose the dark green wool, the high collar, the small jet buttons, the simple silver pin at her throat that had been her mother's. She braided her hair into a single thick braid down her back. She put nothing on her face. She cleaned her hands twice, clipped her nails, put on her last clean pair of boots. She looked in the small glass on the loft wall at herself, a woman of 26, tall, plain dressed, not pretty in the way her sister was pretty, pretty in some other way. Her grandfather's bones, her father had once said, her grandmother's eyes, her great-aunt's mouth, a face assembled from a strain. She had stared at her own face and said, out loud to the empty room, "You can do this." Geoffrey came at 8. He was perhaps 40, graying at the temples, black coat, white gloves, a face that had been trained to give nothing away, my lady. "His lordship is ready." "Thank you, Geoffrey. This way." The corridor to the library was long, stone underfoot, stone overhead, lit real candles, not gas, set in iron sconces. The walls were lined with portraits. She looked at them as she walked, men, mostly, some women, some children, all in clothes from another century or two, or 3, some in armor, some in robes, some on horseback, some standing beside dogs as tall as wolves. None of them was him. None of them was the master of the house. She walked and looked, and waited for a portrait of him to appear. It did not. By the end of the corridor, there had been at least 40 portraits, and not one of them was him. Either he had not sat for a portrait, or every portrait of him had been taken down, which was an interesting thing to think about. Walking toward a door, behind which he waited, Geoffrey stopped at the door. Knocked once. "Come." Geoffrey opened the door, stepped aside. "My lady," she went in. The library was vast, 3 stories. Books to the ceiling on all 4 walls. 2 iron staircases spiraling up to galleries. A large fire in a black marble surround. 3 deep chairs near the fire. A long table with maps unrolled on it. A globe on a brass stand. 2 candelabra lit. The smell of old leather and tobacco and wood smoke stood the fire. Back to her, tall, long coat, dark hair, hands at his sides, perfectly still, the same man. From the courtyard. The night before, Lord Ravenmoor. He did not turn. Not at first. She waited. She had been raised to wait for a lord to turn. A clock on the mantel ticked. 12 times he turned. She had thought she was prepared. She was not. He was younger than she had imagined. That was the first thing. Although the word younger was wrong. The face was perhaps 35. But the eyes were not. The eyes were the eyes of something that had been somewhere a very long time, and had come back. He looked at her. His face did not move, but it lost its color slowly, as if the blood had drained from it by inches, down through the throat, into some other part of him she could not see. He took a single step toward her. He stopped. He took a single step back. He said, You look like a woman I once knew. She held very still. My lord, who is dead, my lord. A long time. He had spoken 3 sentences, and the third of them had been so twice she had nearly missed it. She found her voice. I am sorry. To hear that, my lord. He looked at her as if he had not quite yet believed it, of her standing in his room, of any of it. As if he might, by looking, make her not be there. She did not let her own face move. She had been raised in rooms where a single twitch of the eyebrow could undo a treaty, where breath was a currency, where her mother, who had died of fever when Isolde was 6, had taught her, with the soft cool palm of her own hand on Isolde's cheek, that stillness was a weapon. She used it now. He gathered himself. He was a man, she saw, who was very good at gathering himself. Lady Briarcliff, my lord. Welcome to Castle Ravenmoor. Thank you, your father. She braced herself. Yes. Your father owes me a sum of 100,000 crowns. Yes. He has chosen to pay this with the labor of his eldest daughter. Yes. For 6 months. In my stables. Yes, you agreed to this. I did, my father asked. I came. You came. I am here. You are. He had moved while they spoke. From the hearth to a small carved table. He laid one hand on it. He stood beside it. He was perhaps 8 feet from her. He did not come closer. He did not sit. He did not invite her to sit. He kept the table between them. It was the table, she thought, that was telling. A man who had been alone for a very long time could not perhaps bear to stand too close to a woman who looked like a woman he had once known, who was dead. She felt a flicker of pity. She did not let it show, my lord. Yes, what would you have me do? He looked at her. You are a horsewoman. It was not a question. Yes, you ride. Yes, you break. Yes, you have trained. Your father wrote. Since you could walk. Yes. And you are reputed to have the hands of your grandfather. She did not say that she did. But she also did not say that she did not. She let the question hang. He almost smiled, a thing that did not quite reach his mouth. He said, Tomorrow morning, at dawn, you will come to the east stable, where you will meet a horse. I will then ask you to ride him to the end of the riding field. If you can, your father's debt will be considered cleared. In full, she said. And if I cannot, he said, then you serve the full 6 months, she said. And if I refuse, then you serve the full 6 months. And the horse is the worst horse I own. Worst. He has killed 4 sen, Lady Briarcliff. The fire cracked, she said, and you would have me. The 5th, he said. I would have you decline. She blinked. My lord. I would have you decline to meet him. He had said it, plainly, without any expression at all on his face, as if it were a small embarrassment to him to be saying it. And yet he had said it. She did not understand him. She did not understand any of this. And yet you offer it. I offered you a choice, not a choice. A wager. With my life, as the stake, yes, and you would prefer I not take the wager. I would prefer it. Then, why offer it? He did not answer. He looked at the fire. He said, after a long time, because I made an oath, a long time ago, that I would never refuse the courage of a Briarcliff. A Briarcliff. Not a Briarcliff lady. Not a Briarcliff daughter. Not Isolde. A Briarcliff, as if it were a strain. A bloodline. A family of horses he had known. The way men spoke of horses, she said, My lord, we have known each other for 8 minutes. Yes, an oath to my family is older than that. Yes. When? I cannot tell you that yet. When? Lady Briarcliff. She did not press. She had been raised not to press. She had also been raised to know when a man had told her, by saying he could not tell her, that the truth was a thing he meant to tell her later. She filed it. She let it sit. Tomorrow at dawn. The east stable. Yes, I will be there. He looked at her. College did not go back to his... Lady Briarcliff, my lord, I am asking you. Not to be there, my lord. Please. It was the word that undid her. A little. A man like that did not say please. Not to a woman like her. Not to anyone, she thought. In a long time. She held still, my lord. My father owes you a great deal. I owe my father a great deal more. I will be at the east stable. At dawn, he looked at her as if he had said the only thing he could say, and as if it had not been enough, and as if he was, perhaps on this one occasion, in this one room, in this one minute, going to allow himself to be defeated by a woman in green wool. He bowed, a small bow. In its smallness, the most honest thing he had done since she entered the room. "As my lady wishes." She bowed in return. She left. Geoffrey was waiting in the corridor. He walked her back to the loft. He did not say word. She did not sleep. She lay in the bed and she watched the fire, and she watched it die, and she watched the embers go gray, and then black, and then she got up, and she dressed, and she went down to the stables. It was still an hour. She walked past the rows of stalls, past Saint, who lifted her head and snorted as she passed, past stall 18, where the wet bark Filthy was sleeping with her head on the wall, past the tack room, past the carriage house, past the kitchen garden, to the east stable. The door was iron. The bar was across it. There was, she saw now in the lamp she carried, a heavy lock at the base of the door, with a keyhole. There was no key. There was no key, of course, because she was not meant to be here yet. She put her hand on the iron of the door. The iron was warm. She had expected cold, cold of stone, in an unlit building. But the iron was warm. She drew her hand back. She looked at the door a long time. Behind the door something moved. A great weight, shifting, slow, as if waking. Beneath stone, she did not move. She did not move for a long time. Then from behind the door she heard a breath. It was not the breath of a horse. She did not know yet what it was the breath of, but it was not the breath of a horse. She walked away. She walked back through the stables, past the filly, past Saint, past stall 42, up the wooden staircase, into the loft. To the bed. She sat on the edge of the bed, in the dark. For a long time, she did not say out loud the thought that was in her head. That the breath had sounded like a thing that had been waiting for her, specifically, for a long time. As if behind the iron door was not a horse at all, but something that had once been someone, that had heard her footsteps on the stable stones, and had known that she had come. She did not say it, but she thought it. And then she lay down and she closed her eyes for an hour, and the bells of the chapel down the valley began to ring. 6 times. For dawn, the courtyard was thick with mist. She walked across it wrapped in her cloak, her braid heavy down her back. There were people. She had not expected people. She had expected the Lord, and perhaps Hollis, and perhaps Geoffrey. There were a dozen of them. Hollis, Geoffrey, Mr. Pell the steward, Mrs. Quint, in her black dress, with her keys at her waist, who should have been in her own bed saying her own prayers, but was not. Coombs the blacksmith, the 2 grooms who had not met her eye. Wren the boy. White-faced word had spread. She did not yet understand how fast word could travel in a place like this. She would learn. At the center of them, standing alone, in black riding leathers and a black coat, was Lord Mordecai Ravenmoor. He looked as if he had not slept either. He did not greet her. He did not look at her. He said, "Bring him out." Hollis hesitated. "My lord." "Bring him out." Hollis went to the east stable. He went with 2 of the grooms. He had a key in his hand. She had not seen the key the night before. She wondered, briefly, where the key lived. Who carried it? How often it was used? The bar came off. The lock turned. The door opened. The smell that came out was not the smell of any horse she had ever met. It was the smell of stone, and of iron, and of an animal that had been kept in the dark for a long time, without windows, without grass, without sun. It was the smell of a thing that had not been forgotten, but that had been set apart. The horse came out. He was enormous, 18 hands at least. Black, pure black, not bay, not dark brown, black, hair like wet ink, eyes deep and dark and very old. He came out at a walk. He came out as if he were a king inspecting a courtyard. He stopped 6 feet from the door. He looked at the crowd. He looked at each of them. He looked last at Isolde, and she felt, through her cloak, through her wool, through her skin, through her bones, a thing like a hand brushing the back of her neck. He knew her. He knew her. She did not yet know how she knew that. She knew it. Mordecai said, "Lady Briarcliff, my lord. This is Nightshade. Yes, you may decline." "I do not decline." "You may decline." "I do not decline, my lord." A pause. "Then he is in your hands." He stepped back. He stepped back as far back as he could without leaving the courtyard. She did not see at the time the meaning of that step backward. She would later. She walked forward, slowly, cloak wet at the hem, hair heavy with the mist, boots quiet on the stone. She walked toward the horse. The horse did not move. She walked to within 10 feet of him. The horse snorted, once, hard. She stopped. She raised her hand, palm open, to the side, not extended, the way she had been taught, the way her mother had taught her, when she was a child in a stable, long ago. Before the fever, before the lie, before all of it. She breathed slow, in, out. The horse watched her. She took another step, another, until she was perhaps 6 feet from him, until she was perhaps 4, until she was perhaps 2. The horse stamped once. With a hoof the size of a soup plate, she did not flinch. The horse leaned down. His great muzzle came toward her. Slow, like a creature underwater. He smelled her. He smelled her cloak, her hair, the collar of her dress, her braid, her left hand at her side, and then her right hand. The right hand she had raised to the side, open, palm to him. The sleeve of the dress had slipped a little as she had raised it. The wrist showed below the cuff. The scar showed on the wrist, the pale crescent, white against the skin, like a small moon. Nightshade stopped. The world stopped. She could hear her own breathing, and nothing else. The horse brought his great nose down to her wrist. He smelled it, just the scar, a breath through his nostrils, so warm she could feel it through her sleeve, out in, out. And then he bent his great black neck, all the way, down, until his great black brow touched the stone of the courtyard, at her feet, like a knight kneeling. The crowd behind her gasped. A small woman in a black dress and white collar began, without sound, to cry. Ren the boy fell slowly to his knees on the stone, as if his legs had stopped agreeing to hold him up. Hollis the old stableman pulled his cap off his head, and held it in both hands, before his chest, as if he were in a church, and at the far edge of the courtyard, Lord Mordecai Ravenmoor stood. Perfectly. His hand at his side had closed into a fist. His face was without color. He whispered a word. So softly she did not quite hear it. It was not her name. It was a name older. A name that had not been spoken in this courtyard in a tree. She did not yet know it. She would soon. Above the courtyard, through mist, the eastern sky was beginning to silver. A single bird, on the gargoyle above the keep, the one with the broken wing, began to sing. And Isolde Briarcliff stood in the courtyard of Castle Ravenmoor, with one hand at her side, and one hand raised, and the worst horse her host owned kneeling at her feet. She lowered her hand slowly to the great black brow of the horse at her feet. She laid her palm on the broad bone of his head. The horse breathed out, long and slow, as if setting down a weight he had been carrying for a very long time. She said to the horse, in the voice her mother had taught her to use with horses, "Hello." The horse closed his eyes. She said, "It's all right." The horse did not open them. Behind her the crowd stood as if in a church, as if something had been said that was not for them, as if the dawn breaking over the gargoyle with the broken wing was breaking on a thing none of them had ever expected to see. And the man at the far edge of the courtyard, in his black coat, with his hand closed at his side in a fist, whispered once the name that was not her name, and took a step forward, toward her. For the first time since she had ridden in through his gates, he took a step forward, toward her. And the courtyard of Castle Ravenmoor in the silver dawn held its breath. He took one step, then he stopped, because the horse at her feet had raised its great black head, and was looking at him. And the horse was not looking at him the way a horse looks at a man. The horse was looking at him the way one man looks at another, who has not visited in a long time. Mordecai took a half step back. She watched the man retreat from the look of his own horse. She did not understand it. She did not try to. Yet she kept her hand on the broad black brow at her feet. She said softly to the horse, "Not to him." "All right then." The horse breathed out. She straightened slowly. She did not take her hand away. Not all at once. She let it slide down the long bone, To the neck, to the great curve of the jaw. Nightshade got up. He got up the way an old soldier gets up from a long sleep. With dignity, he put his great muzzle against her shoulder. He stood beside her, as if he had always stood beside her. Hollis, the old stableman behind her, sat down in the wet stone of the courtyard. Without warning. Just sat down. A man of 60 suddenly, sitting in wet stone with his cap in his lap, hands on his knees, eyes on the horse. Mrs. Quint stepped quietly toward him, knelt at his side, took his elbow, did not say anything. The blacksmith Coombs wiped his face with the back of his enormous hand, once, and then again. Geoffrey with his white gloves was looking at Lord Mordecai, the way a man watches a building he has known all his life begin to lean. Isolde took the small leather lead from her cloak pocket, the one she had taken from Saint's Tack before dawn. She slipped it under Nightshade's jaw, loose, just a hand on the neck. No buckle, no tightening, just leather resting. He let her. She turned to Lord Mordecai. "My lord." He did not answer, "My lord." "The wager was that I ride him to the end of the field," he said slowly, as if the words had come up through a great depth of cold water. "Yes, then with your leave I will ride him to the end of the field." He said nothing. She waited. She had been raised to wait for a lord to speak. He did not speak. "My lord." "Yes, yes, I may. Or yes, you have heard." He almost smiled. A thing that did not reach his mouth. "Yes, you may." She walked across the courtyard, toward the gate, to the riding field. With one hand on the great black neck of a horse that had killed 4 men, the horse walked beside her like a dog. She did not look back. At the courtyard, at Mordecai, at the small woman who was helping the old stableman to his feet. She did not look back, because if she had, she would have wept, and she did not yet have time to weep. The riding field was vast. She had not seen it by daylight before this. It went to the foot of a low hill, at least 3/4 of a mile out, cropped grass, bordered on one side by an old hedge, on the other by a low stone wall, with a gate at the far end. At the near end, where she stood with Nightshade, was the inner wall, the famous wall, the wall Mordecai had never cleared. It was 9 feet of stone, old stone, dressed by a hand long dead, each block roughly the size of a coffin, set without mortar. Standing by weight alone, she had passed it the afternoon before from the courtyard side. She had thought it was the boundary of an inner garden, or perhaps the wall of an old kennel. She knew now that it was not. She knew now that it was the line where Mordecai stopped. She knew that because as she walked the field gate with Nightshade beside her, Mordecai followed, but not all the way. He followed as far as the wall. He stopped 3 feet from the wall. He stood looking at her through the open gate from his side of the line. She walked through the gate. She stood on the field side of the wall. She turned to face him. The gate was open. He could have walked through it, as any man could walk through a gate. He did not. He stood at the line 3 feet back. Even with the gate open, he did not cross. He could not. She watched him stand there, and she understood with a slow, cold clarity that whatever the wall was, it was not a wall of stone. It was a wall around him. She did not say what she had just understood, "My lord." "To the end of the field." "To the end of the field," he said it quietly. She turned away from him to the horse. She placed her hand on the withers. "All right, then." She vaulted up. She had vaulted up onto horses since she was 9. She had never vaulted up onto 18 hands of pure black out of a dark stable. She did it anyway, in one motion. Cloak, boots, braid. She landed on his back. No saddle, no bridle, only the loose leather around the jaw. He stood very still beneath her. He turned his great head to look back at her. At her boot on his ribs, she felt through her thigh, through the wool, through her skin, a pulse, a hot, strange pulse, not the pulse of a horse, the pulse of a great heart beating beneath a great chest. She did not let her face move. She tapped once, lightly. With her heel, he walked. Out into the field. The mist was still on the ground to the height of her ankles. So they walked out into a sea of silver. Up to the horse's hocks. She did not trot him. Not yet. She walked him the length of half the field. Slow. Quiet. She listened to his breathing. She listened to the soft, heavy beat of the great hooves on the wet grass. She let him choose his own pace. She wanted to know him. When the half of the field was behind her, she felt him ask. He asked the way a horse asks, with a small roll of the shoulders, with a small sigh out through the nostrils, with a tiny lift of the head. She said to him inside her own chest, without speaking, "All right." She gave him the thigh, just a touch. He shifted into a trot, long, smooth, easy, as if he had not trotted in a very long time, and was remembering how she gave him a little more. He shifted into a canter like rocking in a cradle, like a tide coming in over a long, flat beach. She let him run. He ran. She had ridden her grandfather's gray. She had ridden 3 of her father's best. She had ridden the hunter Lord Pell had lent her, the summer she had turned 18. She had not ridden anything like this. He moved the way water moves in a clean stream over polished stones. She bent forward onto his neck, her braid loose behind her, the wind in her face, the mist breaking around them as they passed. She thought briefly about her mother, about the woman who had taught her to open her palm to the side to a horse, about the woman who had died of fever when Isolde was 6, the woman who had not died of fever perhaps, after all. She did not think about that for long. She had a field to ride. She rode until the far gate came up like a low dark line at the end of the silver sea. She slowed him easily. He listened. He came down to a trot, to a walk, to a standstill just before the gate. She had ridden to the end of the field. The wager was won. She turned the great black horse back to face the wall. The wall was 3/4 of a mile away, a low dark line, with a small figure standing just before it on the courtyard side, watching. She felt something move in her chest. She felt something that she did not yet have a word for. She thought about what she did next. She had won the wager. She had cleared her father's debt. She could now ride back to him through the gate, loose, tired horse, smiling through a smile that would change everything between them. She could do the other thing. She was 26. She had spent 26 years doing the right thing, the careful thing, the thing that did not disturb her father's peace, or her mother's memory, or her sister's future. She had been told as a small child by the tutor, with the slow, soft voice, that a noblewoman of any kingdom should never do a thing once, merely because she had been told she could not. She had nodded as a small child. She had not, as a small child, quite believed him. She believed him now. She bent forward onto the great black neck. She whispered, "Friend." She gave him the thigh. He went from a standstill to a gallop in 3 strides, as if he had been waiting for her to say it. She rode him back up the field, through the silver mist, hair flying, cloak streaming, hooves like thunder. Mordecai watched her come. She saw his face from a 1/4 mile out. She saw him understand. She saw him step forward to the open gate. She saw him open his mouth to call to her, to slow, to stop, to go through the open gate. She did not go through the open gate. She rode to the left of the open gate. She rode straight at the wall. The black horse did not slow. He did not hesitate. He lengthened. He went up. He went up into the mist, like a thing that had been built for this. She felt his hindquarters gather beneath her. She felt the leap begin from his ribs. She felt the wall pass under her. She felt air. She felt air. She felt the grass of the courtyard side of the wall meet his hooves like a hand catching. He landed, clean. He took 3 steady strides and stopped, in the courtyard, 3 feet from Mordecai. She straightened slowly from the great black neck. She breathed out once, long. She looked down at the man who had never cleared this wall. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the wall. His face was white. "You jumped it, yes. You jumped it, I did. You jumped it, my lord." He turned slowly to her. He looked up at her on the great black horse from his side of the wall, the side he had never crossed. His face did not change color, but his eyes did. She had thought they were gray with a darkness behind them. She saw now that she had been wrong. The darkness was the color. The gray had been a veil, and the veil was lifting. She held very still. "Get down." She got down. She slid from the great black back to the wet stone. Her boots hit the flagstones. He looked at her a long time. He did not say anything. The crowd of the household was still in the courtyard. The blacksmith, the grooms, the boy, Wren, Hollis on his feet now. Mrs. Quint with her hand on Hollis's arm. They were not looking at Mordecai any longer. They were looking at her. The way people look at a person they have decided, without saying, to follow. She felt it briefly, and was frightened of it. She had not come here to be followed. She had come here to pay her father's debt, my lord. The wager is yours, then my father's debt cleared. In full, then I am free to go, he said, after another long pause. Yes. He said it as if the word cost him something. Thank you, my lord. She did not move. He did not move. The household did not move, and then, because the silence was about to kill someone, most likely her, she said, my lord, yes. Beyond the wall, yes. There is something. Yes, what? Lady Briarcliff, my lord. I have jumped your wall. I think I have earned the question. A long pause. There is a garden, and within the garden a small building, and within the building he looked at her. Do not ask that yet. Why not? Because I will have to answer, and you do not wish to. I do not wish to. Yet when? Tomorrow at dusk. Why dusk? Because I cannot bear the morning twice in a row. She did not press. She bowed. A small bow. The bow of a horsewoman to a man who had just lost a wager of a quarter century. She turned. She led Nightshade, past Mordecai, past the crowd, past Hollis, past Mrs. Quint, past the boy Wren whose eyes were the size of saucers, across the courtyard to the open door of the east stable. She walked inside. She walked the great black horse back to his stone stall. She removed the leather lead. She laid her hand once on the broad black brow. Tomorrow the horse closed his eyes. She left the stall. She closed the iron door behind her. She did not bar it. She let the bar lean against the wall. She walked out of the east stable. Hollis was at the door. He took her hand in both of his hands, calloused, cold, trembling. My lady, Hollis, I have been in the service of Lord Ravenmoor since I was a boy. Yes. In all that time I have not once seen him cross that wall. I know. I have not once seen anyone cross that wall. I know. I do not understand what I have seen this morning. Nor do I. But I know what I have seen. She did not answer that. He squeezed her hand once. Hard. He let it go. He stepped back. He pulled his cap off and held it to his chest. He bowed, the way an old man bows to a young woman who has come back from a great war alive. She passed him. She walked across the courtyard through the silver mist, to the stable where her own loft was, above the stall where Saint was waiting. She climbed the wooden stair. She went into the loft. She closed the door. She sat on the bed. She put her face in her hands. She wept, not from fear, from something else, something she did not yet have a word for. She slept for 3 asuros. She woke at noon to a knock on the loft door. Yes, my lady, lunch. Mrs. Quint says you'll be wanting it. It was the boy Wren. She let him in. He had a tray, soup, bread, cheese, a small dish of stewed plums, and on the side a small glass of brandy, the kind Mrs. Quint would not have given to a lady under any other circumstance. He set the tray on the table. He did not leave. Wren, my lady, sit. He sat. By the fire, cross-legged, the way he had the night before. She tore the bread. She held out half of it. He took it, eat. He ate. She ate for a while. Neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, my lady, yes. Hollis says you are to stay. What? He says to Mrs. Quint. The lady is to stay. We will find her a room inside the keep. But the wager was that I could leave, I know. And the debt has been cleared, I know. Then Wren, why am I to stay? He said to very softly. Hollis said to Mrs. Quint, the horse has chosen her. We do not send away a person the horse has chosen. She set down the bread. Wren. Yes. Have you ever seen the horse choose anyone before? Once? When? Before I was born. How do you know it then? Because the old men speak of it sometimes. At the back of the stables. Late. When the master has gone to bed, and the person the horse chose before, he said very softly. They never say her name, my lady. The fire cracked. Her. Yes, my lady. She did not eat any more of the bread. She drank the brandy in one long pull. It went down her throat like a hot hand closing around a place inside her that had been very cold. "Wren, my lady, take this away." He took the tray. He bowed. He went to the door. He paused. He turned, "My lady, yes, the boy who chose you." Without being told, the boy, "Me, Wren, yes. Why?" he said after a long time. "Because I am not afraid of horses, my lady. Any of them, yes. But until this morning there was one I was afraid of. A little nightshade, yes. And now, I am not afraid of him any more." He bowed. He left. She did not stay in the loft that afternoon. She could not bear it. She put on her plainest riding habit and her oldest boots, and she went out through the gate of the castle, down the long wet road toward the village in the valley below. She did not tell anyone where she was going. She just walked. She walked because walking was the one thing her body knew how to do without thinking, and she could not bear thinking. She walked 3 miles. The village came up slowly out of the trees. A small church with a stone spire. A small green with a stone cross. 3 streets of stone houses, smoke from chimneys, a blacksmith, a baker, a small shop selling what looked like everything from candles to dried fish to boots. She did not go into the village. She turned off the road before the green onto a smaller path that went up into the woods behind the village. She had been told to turn off there. She had been told by Wren as she left the stable. She had said to Wren, "Where can I walk where no one will know me?" He had said, "Up the hare path from the green, 1/2 a mile. Cottage, old woman. Who is she, Malus?" "She is Malus. And why, because, my lady, she is the only person in this valley who is older than him." She walked the 1/2 mile. The cottage came up out of a clearing in a stand of birch, small, stone, thatch, a line of smoke drifting from a chimney. A goat tied to a post by the door. The door was open. A woman sat on a low stool just inside the door, shelling beans into a wooden bowl on her knee. She did not look up. She said, "Took you long enough." Isolde stopped in the path. "Pardon." The old woman looked up. Her eyes were the color of slate after rain. Her face was maps of small lines. Her hair was white as snow, drawn back in a small tight knot. "Come in, girl. The kettle is on, and the rain is coming back." Isolde looked up. The sky had indeed begun to darken. She went into the cottage. The cottage was 1 room, a bed in one corner, a small wooden chest beside it, a hearth with a kettle, a small plain table with 2 plain stools, a shelf of jars above the hearth, each jar labeled in a hand, so small Isolde could not read it from across the room, a bunch of dried and lavender hanging from a beam, a bunch of dried yarrow from another, a clean, quiet, strong-smelling room. The old woman got up from her stool with more ease than Isolde would have expected of a woman her age. She went to the hearth, took down 2 earthenware cups, poured tea from a brown pot, brought the cups to the table, set one down in front of Isolde. She sat, she said. "Now then," Isolde said. "You knew I was coming," the old woman said. "I knew you were coming since the storm, girl." Isolde did not move. She did not move for a long time. Then she sat down on the empty stool across the table from the old woman. "The storm." The old woman sipped her tea. "Drink yours while it's hot." Isolde drank. It was strong, black, honey, and something else, some root she did not recognize. It opened a small warm place in her chest, where the morning had left a great cold hollow. "Who are you?" "My name's Macelis. I have lived in this valley a long time." "How long?" "Longer than the village down the road." "How?" "That is not the question you came to ask." Isolde set down the cup. "All right. What is the question I came to ask?" The old woman looked at her. "Pull up your sleeve, girl." "Show me the wrist." Isolde pulled up her sleeve. The crescent scar showed white on her wrist. The old woman set down her cup. She reached across the table, took Isolde's wrist in her 2 dry, warm old hands, turned the wrist up, looked at the scar a long time. Then she set the wrist back down on the table. "I am the woman who put it there, girl." The fire cracked. Isolde held very still. When you were 6 weeks old. It was November. There was a great storm that night. The wind took the roof off the old church in the village, and the river came up to the bridge. We crossed the bridge just before the bridge went. We crossed in the wagon. The wagon had to be cut loose on the far side. The wheels were stuck. We carried you the last mile. Who is we? 3 of us carried you the last mile. Who? Myself. Your nurse Bertha, who loved you as her own. Yes, and yes, Lord Mordecai Ravenmoor. Isolde stood up. She did not mean to stand up. Her body stood up without consulting her. She walked to the door of the cottage. She stood with her hand on the door frame. She breathed slow, slow, slow. She closed her eyes. She said to the open doorway, to the wet path, to the goat tied to the post, to the rain beginning to fall again in the clearing. No, the old woman said behind her. Yes, girl. No, I know it is hard. He killed my father. Lord Briarcliff is not your father. He is my father. He is the man who took you in when the storm was over. He is the man who raised you as his own. He is the man you owe everything to. But he is not your father. Then who? Drink your tea, girl. Sit down. Drink your tea. Then I will tell you. Isolde did not sit down. She stood in the doorway of the cottage of an old woman who had carried her the last mile in a great November storm a quarter century ago. Tell me now, the old woman said, after a long time. Your father was King Aldric, the 3rd of the line of Blackthorn, who sat upon the throne of the men of this valley for 19 years, and was murdered in his bed by his younger cousin. Isolde stood very still. Lord Thaddeus. The old woman looked up. How did you know that name? I do not know that name then. How? My mouth said it before my head could. The old woman looked at her a long time. Sit down, girl. Isolde sat down. Lord Thaddeus Ravenmoor is the killer of your father, and the man who would have killed you. 6 weeks old in your crib. If Mordecai had not carried you to this cottage through the storm in November, but they are of the same house. Yes. Thaddeus is Mordecai's cousin. Yes. Then Mordecai saved me from his own blood, the old woman said. Mordecai loved your mother very much, girl. The fire cracked my mother. Your mother was a Briarcliff of the older line, who married King Aldric in her 20th year, and bore him 1 child in her 25th, whom she named Isolde, and whom she lost hold of the night her husband was killed, the night the storm took the roof off the old church, and my mother died with my father. Your mother did not die that night, girl. Your mother died 6 years later, of fever, in the small manor of Briarcliff, where she had taken shelter as cousin to the master of the house, pretending to be a widow of a soldier killed in a border war, pretending to be mother of a child who was not her own. She was my mother. Yes, girl. She was your mother. Isolde closed her eyes. She did not open them for a long time, and the man I called father, Lord Edgar Briarcliff, took you in as your mother's daughter, and raised you as his own, and loved you very much. He is not your father, but he raised you. He is the man you owe, and the reason I am here now in this valley. Because you have come of age, girl. Because the line of Aldric has been hidden a quarter century from Thaddeus. Because Mordecai has waited that long to tell you what you are. And because he could not tell you until you came of your own free will's valley. He could not, girl. Why? Because the oath he swore to your mother the night she died of fever, in the manor of Briarcliff, said so. What oath? The old woman said, after a long time, that he would not burden you with crowns you did not ask for. He swore that you would be free. The cottage was very quiet. The rain had begun to hit the thatch. Isolde sat with her 2 hands on the table. Then the wager last night. Yes. He made a wager he did not want me to take. Yes. Because he had promised not to burden me. Yes. But he needed me here. Yes. So he set the wager as a hook, and begged me to decline. Yes. Knowing I would not, the old woman said. You are your father's daughter, girl. The rain was on the thatch. And the horse. The old woman looked up. Ah, what is the horse? The horse is the one thing I will not tell you today. Why? Because some truths are the man's to tell, and that one is his. Tomorrow at dusk. Yes, girl. Tomorrow at dusk. She walked back to the castle in the rain. She did not hurry. The rain was cold, and the road was long, and the thinking was the kind that could not be hurried. She walked with her hood up through the puddles. She thought about her sister. She thought about Cassia, about the small wooden box of letters on the table in the loft, about the last letter Cassia had sent 3 weeks ago, The letter had been strange. She had not allowed herself to think of it as strange at the time. She had read it and folded it and put it in the box with the others. Because Cassia was Cassia, and Cassia wrote letters the way Cassia was. But, in the rain on the long road, back from the cottage of an old woman who had carried her as a baby through a storm a quarter century ago, Isolde thought about the letter. The letter had said that Cassia was very happy about the engagement, that Lord Thaddeus was a perfect gentleman, that he had visited 3 times already, that the wedding would be at Castle Ravenmoor itself in the spring, that Cassia had found a dress she had not worn of Mother's in the east attic with the blue silk lining there, and had cried to was cheerful. Too cheerful, in the way of a girl who has told herself to be cheerful out loud, because the quiet in her chest has begun to frighten her. Isolde walked 3 miles of wet road thinking about the blue silk lining. She had been told her mother had had no such dress in the attic. Her mother had burned 3 trunks of her own things 2 years before she died of fever. Isolde had been 4. She had watched her mother burn the dresses in the kitchen garden at dusk. She remembered the blue silk lining of one of those dresses going black, and then gray in the fire. She had been 4. She had asked why. Her mother had said, because, little one, some lives have to be burned before they can be lived. Isolde walked 3 miles of wet road thinking about that blue silk lining going gray in her mother's fire when she was 4, and about Cassia, crying to find the dress in the east attic last month, the dress that did not exist anymore. The fire in her chest was cold. She thought Cassia knew. Cassia knew something she had not said. Cassia had said she cried over a dress that did not exist. To cover the fact that she had found something else in the attic, a letter perhaps, a paper, a box of something from the years before Mother died of fever. A thing which had told her sister the truth of Isolde, and Cassia had not told Isolde about it. She stopped in the middle of the road. She stood in the rain. She said out loud to nobody, Cassia. The rain did not answer. She started walking again. Faster. By the time she reached the gates of Castle Ravenmoor, the sun was going down behind the mountain, and the lamps in the courtyard were being lit by the lamp boy. She walked through the gates wet to the bone, hood up, boots squelching. She did not go to the loft. She went to the keep. She went up the 3 steps. She knocked on the black door. Joffrey opened it. He looked at her once. My lady. His lordship. In the library. Take me there. She did not take off her cloak. She did not wring out her braid. She did not wipe her boots. She walked wet through the corridor of portraits with the missing face. To the library door, Joffrey knocked. Come. He opened the door. She walked in. Mordecai was by the fire. He turned. He saw her. His face did not move, but his eyes did. The darkness behind the gray was already there in the room before she had even spoken. She did not wait for him to, you saved me. Yes. From your cousin. Yes. Who killed my father? Yes. In his bed, and my mother hid you 6 years in the manor of Briarcliff, and died of fever there in the 6th year. And the horse, he said, after a long pause, Lady Briarcliff, you said tomorrow at dusk. Yes, it is almost dusk now. Tomorrow tonight. Lady Briarcliff, my lord. She walked across the library, soaking boots squelching on the carpet, until she stood 2 feet from him. I have walked 6 miles in the rain, and been told by an old woman in a cottage that my whole life has been a story told by other people. Without me in the room, he did not answer. Now I am in the room, he said after a long time. Yes, and I will stand here wet in your library until you tell me about the horse. He looked at her. His face did not move, but something in him did. She saw it move. She saw it settle. Sit by the fire, Lady Briarcliff. You will catch your death of cold. She did not sit. I cannot tell you standing. She sat by the fire. She kept her cloak on. He stood some distance from her, at the marble surround of the hearth, with one hand on the mantel, as if he needed to steady himself on something of stone. He said, The horse is my brother. She closed her eyes. She did not open them for a long time. She said with her eyes closed, Your brother, yes, your brother. Castle Ravenmoor, born of my mother 3 years after me. Eldest cousin of Thaddeus, friend of my whole childhood. He stood between me and my father when my father drank. He taught me to ride. He taught me to read. He taught me to believe in a man's word. She did not open her eyes, and he loved your mother as I loved her, and she loved your father. And so we both lost the same woman to the same man, and were both the better men for it. And the night Thaddeus killed your father in his bed, Cassius and I rode for the palace through the storm to stop him, and we did not reach the palace in time. Thaddeus was already gone with his men. We rode through the palace to the royal nursery to find you already carried out by your mother, to the stables. We met her at the gate. She put you in my arms, and Cassius rode out to hold the bridge. The fire cracked. Hold, so that we could cross. And the bridge held long enough, and then, he said, and then the bridge went with him on it. And he did not drown, because we do not drown, but the river took him far down. And he was cursed there by a woman who lived on the bank, and hated my house, and spoke old words over the water as he came up. Cursed, yes, into what you saw this morning in the courtyard kneeling at your feet. She opened her eyes. He knew me this morning, he said. He carried you the first 3 miles from the palace to the bridge, Lady Briarcliff, with his own 2 hands, through the storm. Before I took you from him and crossed the bridge, before he held it, he smelled the scar. Yes, on my wrist, it is the mark he made, Lady Briarcliff, with the edge of his own ring as he carried you, so that Malus could hide you through the hidden folk, by the mark he knew as his own, she said, without sound. Your brother wears the mark I have worn a 1/4 century on my wrist. Yes, and you have kept him behind an iron door in the east stable. Yes. Why, because there is no place else to keep a brother who has been cursed out of his own body, Lady Briarcliff. There is no place else. The fire cracked. He has been in that stable all of those years, and the wall, he said, was built by me the night we returned with you, so that the garden where your mother met me in the year before she met your father would be kept from the world forever, and so that I would never again cross into it. Because I was not the man she chose. You built the wall around yourself. Yes, and the horse knew me. Yes, and he took me over it, he said, because the wall was built to keep me out of the garden, where the woman I loved walked with the man she chose, Lady Briarcliff. It was not built to keep out her daughter. She rose. She did not know she had risen until she was standing. She walked across the carpet to the hearth. To the man who had stood behind a wall of his own building. She did not touch him. She said very quietly, "Cousin, my lady, my father's brother by love if not by blood. Cousin to me by the same, yes, tomorrow at dawn, yes, you and I will walk through the east stable together. And we will talk to your brother," he said, after a long time. My lady, yes, I have not walked into the east stable in all those years. Tomorrow at dawn you will. He looked at her. His face did not move, but the darkness behind the gray settled, like a sea after a storm. As my lady wishes, she left. She walked wet through the corridor of portraits with the missing face. To the stables, to the loft, to the bed. She sat on the bed. She did not take off her wet cloak. She took out the wooden box of letters from her sister. She opened it. She took out the last letter Cassia had sent. She read it again in the light of the loft lamp, with the rain on the window and the fire burning low in the hearth. She read every line, twice, 3 times, until she reached the last line. She read the last line 4 times. The last line said, "Sister, I miss you so very much. But I am sure you will be happy where you are." She set the letter down. She did not cry. She had cried enough for one day, she thought to herself very calmly. In the voice her mother had taught her to use with horses, with children, and with men. "I am sure you will be happy where you are." She said to herself aloud in the loft, to the rain on the window, to the fire burning down, to the wooden box of letters. Cassia. The rain did not answer Cassia. What did you know? The rain did not answer Cassia. The rain did not answer. She put the letter back in the box. She closed the box. She did not open it again that night. She lay down in her wet cloak with her boots still on and the lamp still burning, and the rain still on the window. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She did not sleep because she was listening for the sound of a breath through an iron door, for the sound of a brother who had held a bridge, for the sound of a wall that was about to come down. She listened all night long, and somewhere in the dark hours before dawn she thought she heard, through the rain, through the window, through the distance of the far side of the courtyard, a hoarse sigh, long and slow, as if setting down a weight he had been carrying for a very long time. Dawn came. She had not slept. She rose. She washed her face. She braided her hair. She put on the dark green wool, the high collar, the small jet buttons, the silver pin at her throat that had been her mother's. She went down the wooden stair. Mordecai was waiting at the door of the stable. He had not slept either. She could see it in the way a man stands when a night has gone by him without giving him anything to put. Down, my lady. Cousin. He flinched, the smallest flinch. Of a man who had not been called cousin by anyone in a great many years, he recovered. Are you ready? No. Then walk anyway. They walked. Across the courtyard, past the dry fountain, past the gargoyle with the broken wing, past the kitchen garden, past the carriage house. To the east stable the iron door was standing open. She had left it unbarred the morning before. The bar still leaned against the wall where she had left it. The door stood just slightly ajar. She stopped. Mordecai stopped 3 feet from the threshold. My lady, I know. I have not. I know. All of those years. I know, cousin. She put her hand on his arm, the first time she had touched him. His arm through the wool of his coat was as cold as stone in a river. She did not pull her hand back. Then we go in together. He looked down at her hand on his arm. He looked up at her face. Together, they went in together. The stable smelled of stone, of iron, of straw, of an old animal long kept. The stall was at the end of a single aisle. Nightshade was standing in the center of the stall, head up. Watching the door, he had heard them coming from the far end of the courtyard. When he saw Mordecai, he stopped breathing for a moment. Then the great black head came slowly forward over the stall door. Mordecai walked to the stall door. He raised his hand. His hand was shaking. She saw it from 2 paces behind him. His hand was shaking. He laid his palm on the broad black brow. He said to the horse in a voice she did not know he had, "Brother." The horse did not move, brother. "Forgive me." The horse closed his eyes. "I will bring her home to you. Tonight." The horse did not open his eyes. "I swear it." The horse breathed out once, long and slow. She walked past Mordecai to the stall door. She laid her hand beside his hand on the broad black brow. "Uncle." Mordecai beside her made a sound she did not know he could make. The sound of a quarter century coming out through a throat that had held it long. The horse pressed his nose into her palm. She said to the horse, "To Cassius, who had carried her 3 miles through a storm a quarter century ago, whose ring had made the crescent on her wrist, uncle. Tonight you come home." The horse did not move. She knew he had heard her. She turned to Mordecai. "Now tell me about Cassia." He told her, not in the stable. They walked out across the courtyard, into the library, where Mrs. Quint had laid a pot of tea. As if she had known they would be coming from the east stable at dawn. As if she had known the pot would be needed, he told her. He had had word from a man of his in the southern counties last week that Lord Thaddeus had bought a wedding coach for Lady Cassia of Briarcliff. And the coach had been fitted with iron bands on the doors, and with locks on the outside. Iron bands on the doors of a wedding coach. Locks on the outside. Isolde set down her tea. "He means to bring her as a prisoner." "Yes, why?" "Because he knows by now that you are here, he knows. Lord Edgar Briarcliff owes Thaddeus money. As he owes me money. Your father drinks, and your father talks when he drinks. And Thaddeus listens to men who talk when they drink. My father has always been a weakness in the wall." She closed her eyes. She did not open them for a long time. "Then, the engagement is a trap for you, Lady Briarcliff. The wedding is to be held in this castle in 3 days. by the terms of an old treaty between our houses, which I cannot refuse without cause, and he will bring Cassia in the coach with iron bands. Yes, and the dress. Pardon, she said. There is a blue silk-lined dress, Lord Ravenmoor, which my mother burned in a kitchen garden 22 years ago, which my sister wrote to tell me she had found in an attic last month. The dress that does not exist was found by my sister. He looked at her after a long time. In an attic, in Briarcliff, yes. Then there is a letter or a paper or a box in that attic, Lady Briarcliff, which your sister has found, and not told me, not told you. Yes, the fire cracked. Cassia knows, some of it at least, and has been silent. Yes, because the engagement of a younger sister to a great lord will cover many things. Yes, even a blood older than her own, he said after a long time. Lady Briarcliff, your sister is 22 years old. She has been asked by a man who calls himself a great lord to be his lady, and she has been asked in the same week she found a box in an attic that tells her sister is the daughter of a murdered king. Yes, that is not the same as knowing. I know, cousin, but she has not written to you. No, and that is a choice. Yes, the fire cracked. She thought of her sister. She thought of Cassia at 6. Following her into the hayloft with the small ginger kitten she had insisted on bringing, because Isolde had said it was time for the kitten to learn to climb. Of Cassia at 12, weeping in her bed for 3 days because their mother had been gone 6 years, and she could not remember her mother's voice. Of Cassia at 16, the first ball, the blue ribbon Isolde had tied in her sister's hair before they left the manor. Of Cassia at 20, laughing at the kitchen table on Christmas Eve. Of Cassia at 22, alone in an attic, reading a letter. A girl who was 22, and who had been told all her life she was the pretty one, and who had perhaps believed it, because she had been told. A girl who had found, in an attic, a letter that said the sister she had always been compared to was not her mother's daughter at all, was the daughter of a king. A girl who had been afraid. Isolde did not blame her, not yet, but she did not absolve her either. Then in 3 days he will bring her here in iron bands, and he will marry her in your hall, and he will find me in the same house, and he will kill me at the altar in front of her. Yes, unless, we are waiting for him. Yes, and Cassius, yes, then today we plan. Yes, tonight we walk in the garden beyond the wall. He looked at her. My lady cousin, you have not walked in that garden in all your time at Ravenmoor. No, tonight you will. He looked at her for a long time. How? Through the open gate. The gate is open. Yes, I cannot. Yes, I have not. Yes. What did you carry over that wall, Lady Briarcliff? My mother's daughter, he said without sound. Then I will walk with her, tonight. The 3 days came, as 3 days will, they planned. They drilled. They dressed the household in their parts. Hollis cleaned the blade of the old cavalry saber that had been Mordecai's in a war none of them spoke of. Coombs the blacksmith sharpened every edge in the keep. Joffrey sent word to 3 men in 3 different towns, who came by the back road with long wrapped bundles and hard eyes. Mrs. Quint laid the long table as if for a wedding banquet, with white cloth, silver candles, and at the head of the wedding table she set a single chair with carved wood and a red velvet cushion, for the bride, for Cassia. Isolde did not sleep through any of the 3 days. She walked with Mordecai in the garden beyond the wall. He had walked through the open gate the first night, as a man walking through a door into a room he had built and never entered. He had walked slowly. He had stood in the center of the garden, where once, a long time ago, a woman in a green dress had sat on a stone bench, with her hands folded, and had told him that she was going to marry the king. He had wept. Once. Just once. And his hands on the stone bench. She had not looked away. She had also not spoken. She had stood beside him in silence until he had straightened and turned and said to her, with a face that did not move but with eyes that had lost the veil of gray forever, "Thank you, my lady, for coming to this wall," she had said. "Cousin," he had said. "Yes, walk out with me now," and they had walked out through the open gate together. She visited Cassius each morning. She did not ride him. She brought him apples. She brought him oats. She brought him a soft cloth she had stitched a small black crest onto with her own hands. She slid the cloth over his neck and stood with her cheek against his great black shoulder. She spoke to him. She did not know if he heard. She had to believe he did. She told him about Cassia at 6, about the kitten, about the hayloft, about their mother's burning of the dresses in the kitchen garden, about the blue ribbon, about the long Christmas Eve, about the letter. The horse did not move. But the horse listened. She knew. On the third afternoon she stood with Malus at the kitchen garden wall. Malus had come up from the cottage. Geoffrey had sent the carriage. Malus had refused the carriage and walked 3 miles uphill in the rain. With a small leather satchel over one shoulder, she arrived dry under her shawl, as if the rain had agreed to let her through. Malus, girl, the curse. I have spent a quarter century on it, girl, and the old woman sets down her satchel. And I have found one true thing, which is a curse of the old water can only be broken by the hand of the child. The cursed man once carried through a storm. The hand returned in time to the place the carrying ended, and bleeding, a drop of her own blood, touched to the brow of the horse. With the storm above her again. There is no storm tonight. There will be one. How do you know? The old woman looked at her. Because the same wind that broke the church a quarter century ago is in the sky again, girl. I have watched it 3 days. There will be a storm tonight before midnight. Isolde was quiet, she said. Then the wedding hall, yes. And my blood, yes. And the horse will know what to do, girl. When the hand he made the mark on comes back wet, she nodded. She did not say what she felt. She felt, in the bones of her grandmother, and the mouth of her great-aunt, and the hands of her grandfather, she had inherited a thing settled. She had a task. She had a household. She had a sister to save and an uncle to bring home. She was ready. On the third evening the coach came. She watched from the high window of the library. The coach came up the long road through the valley. Black. Drawn by 6 black horses. 2 outriders in black liveries. 8 men on the rooftop of the coach with long wrapped rifles in their hands. She watched the coach stop in the courtyard. She watched the iron bands on the doors. She watched Lord Thaddeus step down from the coach first. He was younger than Mordecai by 200 years. He was beautiful. That was the first thing she noticed. He was beautiful. The way a knife is beautiful when it catches the light. He turned. He held out his hand to the coach door. A maid stepped down first, then Cassia. She came down in a traveling cloak of dark gray wool, with her hood up. Her face was white, whiter than Isolde had expected, whiter than a bride 3 days from a wedding should be. Isolde at the window above put her hand on the cold stone of the sill. Cassia. Cassia did not look up at the window. She walked beside Lord Thaddeus into the keep with her hand on his arm as a bride should, with her head down as bride should not. Isolde stepped back from the window. Mordecai behind her said, "My lady, tonight. The dinner, yes, and after. Yes, cousin, yes, he does not yet know I am here. No, then let us surprise him." The dinner was set in the great hall, the long table of white cloth, the silver candles lit, the carved chair with the red velvet cushion at the head. Cassia sat in the carved chair. She did not look up. Lord Thaddeus sat at her right. He did look up. At everyone. He was charming. He spoke of the wedding, of the flowers, of the carriage ride, of the late mother of the bride, whom he said he had loved like a cousin, because he had once met her long ago, at a court function, which he described. Mordecai listened. Mordecai did not eat. Mordecai watched his cousin lie about the mother of the woman both cousins had once loved, with a face that did not move. Outside the windows, the wind was rising. The candles on the great chandelier above the table swayed once, twice, as if something had walked across the roof. The wind was Malus's wind. The storm was coming when the third course was cleared. Mordecai stood. Cousin Thaddeus. Thaddeus looked up. Cousin Mordecai. Mordecai said, "I would like to present to you a member of my household." Thaddeus smiled. "Of course, cousin." Mordecai looked at the door of the hall. The door opened. She walked in. She wore a dress of dark green wool with the high collar, and the jet buttons, and the silver pin of her mother's. She wore at her hip her father's sword, a short cavalry blade, slightly curved, in a black leather scabbard, with a brass hilt that had been cleaned by Hollis the day before. She had not worn it before in her life, but she wore it now. She walked to the foot of the long table. Cassia looked up. Cassia saw her. Cassia closed her eyes for one long second, like a person who has been told they may put down a weight at last. Then Cassia opened them, and kept them open, and looked at her sister. Lord Thaddeus set down his glass. Slowly, "And who is this?" Mordecai said, "This, cousin, is the daughter of King Aldrich, the third of the line of Blackthorn, whom you killed in his bed a quarter-century ago." The great hall stopped. The candles burned. The silver reflected in the white cloth. Cassia did not close her eyes again. Cassia held her sister's gaze. Lord Thaddeus looked at Isolde. He looked at her as a man looks at a ghost he has once killed and buried. Then he smiled. He smiled the way he had smiled about the flowers. "Cousin Mordecai, you are a liar and a sentimentalist." He stood up. He drew from under the table a long silver knife of his own. 8 men, on the rooftop of the coach with long-wrapped rifles, were not inside the hall. 8 men on the rooftop of the coach with long-wrapped rifles were outside the hall of the great house with Routswide, with long-wrapped rifles aimed at every door from the courtyard. What they did not know was that Geoffrey with his 3 men with hard eyes were on the roof of the great hall already, looking down at the 8 men on the rooftop of the coach. What they did not know was that Hollis with 6 stablemen were in the east stable already with the door open. What they did not know was that Coombs, the blacksmith, was in the courtyard with a hammer he had been forging for a week. What they did not know was that 3 days was a long time for a household to prepare to receive a man who came with iron bands on the doors of a wedding coach. Thaddeus stood at the head of the table with his knife, Mordecai at the foot with his own, Isolde with her father's sword already half drawn. Outside the windows the wind hit the keep like a fist. The storm had arrived. Cassia, stand up. We are leaving. Cassia did not stand up. Cassia did not move. He turned to look at her. He turned with the long silver knife in his hand, and he took one step toward the bride he had brought in iron bands. Mordecai moved, but not fast enough, because Mordecai was at the foot of the table, and Thaddeus was at the head, and Cassia was between. Cassia stood up. Cassia stepped out from behind the carved chair with the red velvet cushion. Cassia took one step toward her sister. Cassia said across the long table, "Sister, Cassia, forgive me. Stand behind me." Cassia stepped toward her sister. Thaddeus threw the long silver knife. It went end over end down the length of the long white table, tight toward Isolde's chest. Cassia was between the knife and her sister. The knife took Cassia in the side. She fell without a sound onto the long white cloth, onto the silver candles, onto the plates, onto the bowls of cooling soup. The candles went over. The white cloth caught fire. The hall caught fire. The doors caught fire. And from the roof above 3 rifles fired down into the courtyard. From the 3 men of Geoffrey, and the 8 men on the rooftop of the coach did not have time to lift their food. And from the east stable door, already open, came the sound of hooves on stone. And from the east stable door came Hollis on foot, and 6 stable men with pitchforks and old pistols. And from the east stable door came Cassius, not as a horse, not as a man, but as a horse with the mind of a man, riderless, free. He came across the courtyard at a gallop. He came into the great hall through the burning doors. He came to the foot of the long table. He came to where Mordecai stood with his own knife and his own cousin across the burning table from him. Cassius reared. He went up on his hind legs, 18 hands of black, against the burning candles. He came down across the length of the burning table with his front hooves aimed at the chest of Thaddeus Ravenmoor. Thaddeus threw himself backwards. He fell off the dais. He landed hard on the stone behind the carved chair. He scrambled up with a second knife in his other hand. Mordecai was there. Mordecai's on him, As Cassius came down off the table, the two men locked. A quarter century plus the centuries before of the same house locked in the burning hall. With knives. Isolde did not watch. She had vaulted onto the table as Cassia fell. She knelt in the burning cloth beside her sister. She pulled the knife out of her sister's side. She tore the sleeve of her own dress. The dark, green wool, the jet buttons snapping off like small black pearls onto the burning cloth. She pressed the wool hard to the wound in her sister's side. But in tearing the sleeve, the knife had slipped in her hand. The edge had passed across her own wrist. Across the pale crescent. White against the skin. Like a small moon, a line of red opened on her old scar. Her blood fell, a drop, 2, 3, onto the burning cloth beside Cassia. Cassia said, "Sister, I am here. I know. Forgive me, Cassia." "Hush. You are forgiven. Mother burned the dress. Yes, the blue silk. I read the letter behind the lining. The letter from Malus to Mother about you. Hush, Cassia." "Hush now. I was so afraid, sister, of losing the only thing I had that was mine, and not yours." Isolde pressed her hand harder on the wound. She said to her sister, "You are still mine." "And I am still yours, Cassia." Cassia closed her eyes. Cassia did not die. She breathed slow, shallow, but she breathed. Outside the storm broke open. The thunder hit the keep. The wind came in through the burning doors. The rain came in through the burning doors. Heavy, heavy, the way it had come a quarter century ago. Isolde turned from her sister. She held up her bleeding wrist. She climbed down off the table. She walked across the burning hall in the storm wind. Past Mordecai locked with Thaddeus. Past the great black horse who was watching her come. She walked to Cassius. Cassius lowered his great black head. She placed her bleeding wrist against the broad black brow. She said, in a voice she had not heard herself use before, in a voice older than her own, in the voice of a woman who had been carried 3 miles through a storm a quarter century ago, and had come back. "Uncle Cassius of the House of Ravenmoor, the mark you made is returned to you now, by the hand that wore it through these years. The storm is over. You may come in." The thunder hit the keep. The horse breathed in. The horse breathed out. The horse did not breathe again. For a long moment he was not a horse. He was not a man. He was only a pause. Then he shrank. He shrank the way a great cloak shrinks when lifted off the shoulders that had carried it. A man stood in the burning hall. Tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, in the plain linen of a man who had worn the same clothes since the night of a bridge. With the marks of a bridge still on his hands, he looked at her. He said in the voice of a man who had not spoken in a quarter century, "Niece," she said. "Uncle," he said. "You came," she said. "You carried me first, uncle." "Of course I came." Then he turned. He turned because behind her his brother was on the floor. Thaddeus had got his second knife up. Mordecai was on his back. Mordecai had hold of his cousin's wrist. But Mordecai was tired. Mordecai had stood 300 years and a quarter century more behind a wall of his own building, and Mordecai was tired. Cassius walked, naked to the waist of his linen shirt, through the burning hall. To his cousin, he picked up Thaddeus from the floor with one hand under the jaw, the way a man picks up a wolf. He looked into his cousin's face for one long moment. He said, "Cousin, you killed our king." Thaddeus did not answer. Cassius set him down on the stone. Carefully, as a man sets down a thing he has decided not to break. Then he said to Mordecai, "Bind him, brother." Mordecai bound him. And then Mordecai stood. And then Mordecai turned. And then Mordecai, for the first time in 26 years, saw his brother's face above his brother's shoulders, with his brother's eyes in it, and the two men, locked, in a burning hall, with the storm coming in through the windows, held each other. They held each other a long time. Isolde did not watch. She walked back to Cassia. She knelt by her sister in the burning cloth. Malus was already in the courtyard with her bag, because Malus had known to come. Malus ran in through the burning doors, knelt by the table, cut away the dress and stopped the bleeding. "She will live," Isolde wept. Just once. Then she stood and helped Malus lift her sister, and they carried Cassia out of the burning hall, into the storm, across the courtyard, through the rain, up the stairs of the keep, to a bedroom, to a bed. The fire was put out by the storm itself before the household could lift a bucket. The hall stood blackened but standing. The storm had ridden in over the keep and put the fire out and got away again, as if it had come for one thing only and had finished its errand. By midnight, Malus had stitched the wound. By 2 in the morning, Cassia was breathing easy. By 3, she was asleep. By dawn, the storm had cleared. Thaddeus was held in the cellar of the keep. 3 days later, a judge of the free towns came up the long road in his black coach. He sat in the great hall, on a chair Hollis had carried in from the kitchen. Because the carved chair with the red velvet cushion had burned, he heard testimony from Mordecai, from Cassius, from Malus, from Hollis, from Mrs. Quint, from Coombs, from Geoffrey, from Isolde, from the 8 men of Thaddeus who had survived the rifles of Geoffrey, and who had agreed to speak for a reduced sentence. He found Thaddeus guilty of the murder of King Aldric III, of the line of Blackthorn. He found Thaddeus guilty of the attempted murder of King Aldric's daughter, Tipple. He found Thaddeus guilty of the attempted abduction of Lady Castle Briarcliff. He sentenced Thaddeus to be bound in iron of the old kind, and sent to a stone cell on a northern island. A messenger from the free towns came 3 days after the trial. He asked her if she would take the crown. She said no. She said, "My father was a good king, I am told. I am his daughter by blood, but not by raising. The free towns have found their own way in 26 years. I will not unmake their choosing. Find the cousin of the royal line in the northern counties, whose name I will send you. Crown him. If he is a good man he will be." The messenger bowed. The messenger left. Cassia healed, slowly. She lay in the bed 2 weeks. Mrs. Quint sat with her. Mrs. Quint had not sat with a young woman in a bed in a long time. Mrs. Quint surprised herself. Mrs. Quint surprised Cassia too, by telling her stories of her mother. The stories Mrs. Quint had been holding in for a quarter century. The stories of a young queen who had once sat in Mrs. Quint's small back parlor off the kitchen and drunk tea, and eaten small cakes. Cassia listened. Cassia wept, once. Quietly. Into the pillow, Cassia got better. By the end of November she could walk. Slowly, down the long corridor of portraits with the missing face. Holding Isolde's arm, the portrait was hung in December. It was a portrait of Cassius of Ravenmoor, sitting on a stone bench in the garden beyond the wall. Painted quickly by a master of the free towns from a sketch Mordecai had drawn the night the curse broke. The portrait hung among the others as if it had always been there. The east stable was pulled down, stone by stone, the week before the snow, by Hollis and Coombs and the stable men, with their hands. The iron door was cut up by Coombs and reforged into a gate for the garden beyond the wall. The wall itself was not pulled down. Mordecai had asked her about it the night after the trial. "My lady, should the wall come down?" No, the wall is now a garden wall, cousin. Around a garden we walk in together." He had looked at her. Together, Cassius was in the library most nights with books he had not read in a quarter century. He read slowly. He read like a man who had forgotten how to use his hands and was teaching himself again. He read aloud to Cassia in the afternoons. He read to her from a book of poems Mordecai had bought in a southern city when he was 50 years old. She listened. She did not say much. She did not need to. The household around her grew quietly used to having 3 of them. Mrs. Quint laid 4 places at the long table now. Mordecai, Cassius, Isolde. Cassia Morga sat down to dinner for the first time in 26 years. He did not eat much, but he sat. He did not need to eat. He had needed, perhaps, only to sit. Wren was given a place in the household by Mrs. Quint. Not in the laundry, not in the stables. In the kitchen, as junior steward. Geoffrey approved. Geoffrey said Wren had the kind of face people told things to, and the kind of mouth that knew when to give them back. Wren was 11 years old. He took the title seriously. He ironed his shirt himself. Hollis got a new coat for Christmas. He cried. He did not let anyone see. Malus came to dinner on the first Sunday of every month. She walked up from the cottage. She refused the carriage. She did not bring anything in her satchel any longer except a small bottle of cordial she had made from the rose hips in her own garden. The cordial was very good. Cassia asked for it especially. Cassia loved it. The first snow came in the first week of December. She walked out to the stables before dawn. The snow was new. The sky was pale. The air was clean in the way only the first snow is clean. Saint was in stall 42 eating oats. The other 63 stalls held 63 horses now, because Cassius slept in a bed inside the keep, in a small room above the library, with a window that faced the eastern sky. Isolde put the saddle on Saint slowly. She tightened the girth. She mounted. She rode out into the long field of new snow. She rode to the end of the field, where the snow was untouched. She turned. She looked back. At the wall, at the Castle of Ravenmoor behind the wall, at the open gate, at the 4 figures standing in the open gate, Mordecai, Cassius, Cassia. Between them, with a shawl around her shoulders against the cold, and beside Ren the boy, standing very straight, in his new coat, the one Mrs. Quint had made for him for Christmas. Because Mrs. Quint had said that a junior steward did not stand at the gate of his master's house in a stable boy's shirt. They were watching her. She raised her hand. They raised theirs. She rode back to them slowly across the field of new snow. She did not cry. She had cried enough. But she felt, for the first time in a quarter century, that the field of snow she had crossed had been a field she chose, that the people waiting for her at the open gate were the people she had chosen, that her mother, who had taught her to open her palm to the side of a horse, was watching somewhere in whatever quiet country lies beyond fever, and was satisfied that her father, the king she had never known, was watching too, and was not displeased that the woman she was becoming was a woman both of them would have known. She rode through the open gate. Mordecai took Saint's bridle. Cassia took her hand. Cassius said, "Niece, Mrs. Quint says breakfast." She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in this courtyard. It came up out of her without warning. It surprised them all. It surprised her most. Mordecai's face did not move, but his eyes, the darkness that had been a color and not a veil, closed once, slowly, like a man who had heard a song he had thought he would never hear again, and had decided to let it stay. She walked between her sister and her uncle and her cousin, and the small red-haired boy in his new coat, across the courtyard, past the dry fountain, up the 3 stone steps, through the black door. Behind them, the snow began, gently, to fall again. It fell on the courtyard. It fell on the wall. It fell on the garden beyond the wall, where a stone bench sat under bare trees, waiting for spring. It fell on a field where a woman in green wool, on a tired mare, had ridden out to the end, and had ridden back, to people who were waiting, and the black door of the keep closed behind them, and the storm of a quarter century ago. The one that had taken the roof off an old church, and the bridge from a brother, and the truth from a child, was over. It had been over for some time. In fact, it was only that she had not, until that morning, known it. Now she did.